Hi everyone. So it's been a bit difficult for me to keep up with this whole one recording a week thing with the baby, but I am taking whichever opportunities do come my way, and one such opportunity for a recording is tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce ESTJ, the practitioner. This starts off the Delta Quadra of types. So when it comes to the ESTJ, this is a very much maligned type, I think, in the Myers-Briggs land. I think it's understood in a very sort of authoritarian, quite parochial way. It's almost as if this type doesn't have extroverted intuition, but it does have extroverted intuition, and we will go into that very much. This is not a narrow type, it's actually a very broad minded type, and grows to become more broad minded over time. And I think the misconception of ESTJ starts with the ego block, what the ESTJ brings to the world, which is TE and SI. And you may have seen in my other videos about TE and SI, extroverted logic, thinking, I should say, and introverted sensation. This is not about hierarchies of control. It's not about being bossy and organizing people in a sort of, you do what I say and structuring everything kind of way. That's not the point of this blocking. That's not what this is about. TE and SI is instead about a sort of day-to-day practicality. It is a very empirical combination. It's the most empirical combination, right? The idea here being that you are looking at evidence, you are learning and trying things out via trial by error, right? You are, by practicing things, getting better at them, improving on them in a very incremental way, and in general, aiming to do things well, aiming to do a good job in one's work. And so when you think of the ESTJ, they start off with extroverted thinking. That's their dominant function. So extroverted thinking is, again, it's about facts, it's about practicality, it's about how things are done in a pragmatic way, how things can be made to work more efficiently and effectively, etc. And the ESTJ is no exception. This is a type that is very much about how you are doing things. This is a very much a process-oriented type. ESTJs are constantly thinking in terms of the facts, the evidence, how they see things working. It's a very important thing, right? It's that they gather knowledge from empirical data, and by testing things. If it hasn't been tested, if they can't see it in front of them, then they are disinclined to even believe it. These are types of developed about testing and making things work and incrementally improving them. And they are strongly driven to do as well as they can in any particular thing they set their minds to. This makes them incredibly productive, highly efficient, effective types. These are the ones who are perhaps the best out of all the types at just sort of getting things done to a good level of quality. And yeah, often these are types which are very sort of factually capable, very competent people. You want these people in your organization. They will be doing a good job of what they're doing. They are very good at managing things effectively. It's because they're just very good at taking in and understanding factual data, knowing how it can be applied best in the particular situation in front of them. And yeah, extroverted thinking is driving that. Very much about, improving things, doing things well. Often the type which has factual advice to offer to others as well, especially people they feel an affinity for. They'll want to share something which I think could actually be helpful, could be useful. It could be going on a very, very long, quite dry lecture on a certain subject where they're sort of telling you about all the different facts involved in this particular case. And they're not inclined to sort of filter out those facts either. It's very much about giving you the full sense of the information so that you can make the most effective decision. So that's what I say about the extroverted thinking of ESTJ. There's a general hope that they have that you are someone who's similar to them, is about learning and growing and getting better at things. And so you want to take in this information and apply it in the best way possible. And so they have that expectation. They almost assume that people want to grow and develop and get better, and they get kind of disappointed people don't do that sometimes. They're not quite sure what to do in those sorts of occasions. Now, supporting extroverted thinking is an introverted sensation. So this flavors the extroverted thinking towards that sort of day-to-day local effect. How is the information being applied in our immediate space in a way which is going to better better achieve better processes? Essentially, it's not about long-term goals so much. It's, is the process good? Is the quality of how this thing is working as optimized as it can be? That's the idea. And in that, they're also thinking of things like conservation of energy, right? Minimal waste of resources going into how things are working. These are types who hate to waste things. They very much prefer to be tinkering with the process to really fine tune it to make it as effective as possible. So that's how introverted sensation is sort of supporting and flavoring their extroverted thinking. So yeah, very much grounded in that sort of day-to-day sense data, which is supporting how they're achieving sort of this attention to process. And again, very much about a marginal fine-tuning as opposed to sort of rapid jumps in inefficiency. But by doing this, by working very hard at things and going through things in all the different details, they can become very effective people. In fact, I'd say one of the most sort of effective in terms of the day-to-day tasks out of all the types. Now we go to the supereger blocks. This is what the ESTJ doesn't value and isn't strong at. These are the external expectations leveraged at the ESTJ. And you've got FE and NI here. So this is all about, well, whereas the ESTJ is more of a sort of classic manager sort of type, the classic charismatic leading expectation in those who are managing is often lost on the ESTJ. These are quite dry and not particularly visionary types. They're far more about doing the best in the situation at hand. They have that earnest desire to work hard and do well in all sorts of things, and they're very good at doing that. But they aren't types which are known to inspire, and that's the thing. And when we get to the role function, this is extroverted feeling. This is the ability to create that sort of emotional effect in other people. Now, ESTJs, they manage this in terms of seeing via social expectation to be a good person in terms of how you come across to others, right? To be a mensch, you could say, to be a polite, to be to tell good jokes, to have good humor, to come across well to people. That is seen by the ESTJ as something which need to factor into their decisions. Really, what they're interested in is what works practically. But at the same time, they know that to be the most effective person they can be, they've got to bring people on side. They've got to get people happy as well around them. So they will cater and socially accommodate those around them. They will think about how the words they're saying are going to be received by other people. And as in all their things that they're doing, try to do a good job at doing that. In general, they'll try to do a good job at everything. So they'll try to do a good job at this. Nevertheless, they aren't really able to take that to unfamiliar situations which require striking a very different sort of mood. They tend to play it very safe, be very sort of conservative in how they're coming across. The expectation is you wear the suit, then you wear the suit. You do this, you do that, you do it in that sort of proper way. They're not going to sort of strike off in a completely unexpected direction in how they're coming across to you. So they're not looking to really attach their ego to this function. It's purely about fitting in enough so they can accomplish the more practical work and not have some sort of dramatic distraction. Next, though, you have the vulnerable function, which is introverted intuition. And for ESTJs, this is the blind spot, essentially. They do not gel with the idea that certain things are inevitably going to happen in a certain way, that this is a destiny, this is the future, this is where things are all inevitably going. Not the ESTJ's way of thinking at all. ESTJs are very kind of anti-mystical. in the way. That's not to say they aren't religious. They can be. I've known of many examples of ESTJs sort of trying out religion. Some then can actually become quite religious. Some just don't become religious at all, and they completely turn their backs on it. Richard Dawkins is a very good example of this. But what these types really do struggle with is the idea of the belief in things inevitably being a certain way without evidence, without being able to see it, without being willing to sort of test it in front of them. These are types which are quite stubborn in their intellect, in terms of they are not going to place their faith in something which, you know, is not something they can actually see and test and, you know, potentially tweak by applying new information to improve it. So yeah, what you'll find with ESTJs is that they are often going to be well taking on projects that are may look good in the short term, but may actually look to be a bad idea in the long term. They won't necessarily see that. They'll just work really, really hard at it, and they'll think they're going to actually succeed in the area, and they won't. They just don't really accept the idea that it was never going to work, in the same way that they don't really accept the idea that you should just sort of believe in something mystically and sort of have the sense of calling. An ESTJ is unlikely to believe that you have some sort of destiny or passion to follow. Instead, it's very much this idea that no, you find whichever situation you're in and you try to do a good job in that situation. And you try to do well, and you try to take advantage of new opportunities as they come your way. But this idea of having a set passion in life is going to limit you and your growth and your development and how effectively you can actually operate. So yeah, they kind of reject this particular information element. Yeah, they don't respond to it very well at all, and that can be quite frustrating to people, because it means that the ESTJ doesn't really see the wood through the trees. They get caught up in sort of they get caught up in the weeds. They're more likely to start tweaking these particular things, but struggle to see things in sort of the overall picture. And yes, they'll make decisions which in the short term make total sense, which work very effectively. All the data is pointing to this, but they won't be comfortable making any of the intuitive inferential leaps which can lead to great insights. So yeah, they'll just get confused, like, where does the evidence show this? And you'll say, well, you've got to read between the lines of the data. And the ESJ says, well, yes, but I don't see anything written between the lines in these data. And that's sometimes a difficulty with the ESTJ when it comes to introverted intuition. They don't grasp the underlying point. I remember this one ESTJ is actually a sociologist, and his approach to typing people is very much, listening to particular examples and saying a certain thing and doing a tally and chalking out the tally of how it's actually done. It is an approach which is very empirical at all, but it's completely missing the point, which is that you got to grasp the person holistically. What are they about at the end of the day? If you break it down into how many times they say a certain word in a certain way, that can be very much context driven. So that isn't necessarily a good way of measuring type. You need to grasp the person and the point of the person, which is exactly what an ESTJ is not really equipped to do, because that is a very sort of see the wood through the trees approach, and they are very much instead do not see the wood because of the trees. So now we get to the Supereger block, which is Introverted Ethics, Introverted Feeling, I should say, and Extroverted Intuition. The idea here is that the ESTJ is a type which greatly values this and wants to grow in this. They also need a bit of help in this as well. It is a sort of an area of private aspiration and growth. And they find this is about an appreciation of the inner self, and the willingness to give people a chance to better understand the inner nature of someone and their potential to be a good person. That's what the ESTJ sort of covets in a way. They are a type which is very much about the external. They're much about how well are they doing X, Y, Z, right? Are they doing this thing well? Have they accomplished this? Look what I've done. I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, done this, and this. All about what they've done. And so they often lose a sense of who they actually are in what they're doing, and they don't easily stop and reflect on, is this really is this really me? Is this really what I am about? Is it really in line with my intentions? Is this really in line with what is actually sincere to me to some degree? And these ESTJ can almost lose that sense of their sincerity and simply doing what is actually practical and works well. They have there's a certain naivety to an ESTJ in terms of things being measured by their practical value rather than looking within to that spiritual side. So this is where an ESTJ really benefits from someone else. And specifically, this is in regard to the suggestive function, which is introverted feeling. ESTJs are not very good at getting a real sense of a person underneath the actions, just as much for others as for themselves. They often don't know what their own, if they actually are a good person under it all. They wonder what is actually driving them. Is it simply practical pressure? Is it the force of a situation? What they really need is for someone to look beyond what they're doing to the character within and say, you are a good person, and I like you for who you are, and I want to get to know you and understand you more fully. They crave that sort of intimate connection, but lack the confidence to really form that themselves with others. And so you'll find that an ESTJ can often drift off into more transactional relationships with others, thinking about what is actually working, what can actually be best used to achieve certain short-term goals. They need that strong, intimate connection in their private life, really. And once they have it, they'll be can be very, very committed partners by having someone like that in their lives. By having that, it also frees them up from having to sort of put on that sort of menschy, good-natured performance for everyone else, because they know that's the sort of thing they ought to be doing. But what they really, really want is someone who just sort of understands them without them having to, dress things up at all. And that enables them to just be honest, just to be straightforward, which is what they really, really crave and what they really, really want. So yeah, that's sort of the introverted feeling side. ESTJs are types that place a great deal of value in these very, very close relationships once they actually built. The problem is, at the same time, because they are so driven towards their actions, they can often be racked by a sense of deep guilt for doing things wrong, for not being good enough in actually doing right by a certain person, or they could have actually done this better and done that better, because they could easily see how things can be improved. So they really need someone else to sort of validate their soul. That's really what it's about. They have that sort of self-doubt within, despite appearing very competent on the outside, about the nature of their soul and whether they actually are a good person at the end of the day. They need that validation. Now, the other part to this is the mobilizing function, extroverted intuition. What you'll find with an ESTJ is that they grow towards us over time. They become more open-minded, more likely to explore alternative possibilities to things. These are types which have to learn to step back from a situation. It's so easy for them to sort of take it over, which they don't want to do in and of itself. They're not looking to control. They just think, oh, the situation probably best be served me stepping in and helping in this. But no, what they actually start to learn over time is, no, I can actually step back and allow people to actually do things themselves effectively. And I can actually allow more possibilities to flow that way and enable more people to realize their potential around me. That's what's very satisfying to an ESTJ. Giving people the information, the means to actually find things and do things themselves. ESTJs are not naturally controlling types. They're types which value very much self-sufficiency, growth, and personal development. So for them, their growth is becoming more open, allowing things to go into new directions and new possibilities. And so, yeah, as ESTJs develop, they become more and more open-minded. Another thing to consider here is that because of this idea of there always being new possibilities, An ESTJ may often see their ability to be successful as being based in them preparing for every single possibility there is. Because they don't see how things will develop in the long run necessarily, but they do start to see the potential ways in which things could develop. They'll just plan for every single possibility. And they can be really, really anal about that. Literally setting out very clear schedules, seeing all these different sorts of things, how everything is accounted for, really throwing the book at making their ideas work, having a plan, trying to really account for it and putting it into action. The problem is sometimes that still is just going to fall through. I can think of one ESTJ who ran a restaurant and it was never going to work, but he really, really tried. Wasn't successful at the end of the day of the restaurant. It folded. But that's kind of the idea, right? They will take on the project and refuse to believe that it was never going to work, always keeping open the possibility it could work, as long as they account for every single possible way in which it could go wrong. So yes, that's one of the difficulties with the ESTJ. And similarly, they are types which are actually very skeptical, as I said, towards mystical beliefs, any sort of article of faith. They need to be testing it. They always go, it depends on the situation. You could also put it in this way, you can also put it in that way. They don't like simplistic generalizations of things. They're far more likely to see the many different ways in which something could be other than the way in which you have suggested it must necessarily be. And so that is a certain stubbornness in their intellect, a stubbornness in their sort of refusal to believe and to have faith in this thing as the truth. Instead, for them, it's all depends on the situation. You'll see this a lot with someone like a Richard Dawkins figure. But yes, okay. Finally, we get to the id block. And the id block is what is not valued, but is nevertheless strong. And so this is the sort of hierarchical command, control, impact on your surroundings sort of thing. Not what the ESTJ likes to do, but they are very capable of defaulting to this area. First of all, we have the ignoring function. This is what the ESTJ does not do unless absolutely necessary, and that's really the structures and the rules. ESTJs don't see things in terms of absolutes. They see things in terms of the huge volume of facts that they've been able to take in, absorb, and give out regularly to improve various processes around them. So they don't think structurally, they don't think ideologically. They're very much pragmatists, not ideologues. You actually may find out of all the delta types, ESTJs are ones most often found in politics because they're very competent and able to very quickly climb ladders that are based around competence. And that person does a good thing well, I'll make him my or her my vice, whatever, because I know there'll be a safe pair of hands. ESTJs are the ultimate safe pairs of hands. But in doing that, they'll take a pragmatic view. They won't be extreme in their view. If they're on the left, they'll be on the right of the left. If they're on the right, they'll be on the left of the right. It's all about however it works in any particular situation. They don't tend to draw hard and fast rules. Nevertheless, they're good at, understanding these structures and utilizing these structures where they think it is handy. If for instance, in a sort of a pragmatic government or regime led by many ESTJs, they'll have rules. These rules will be guidelines. These rules will not be absolutely ideologically upheld beliefs. And finally, we get to extroverted sensation, which is the demonstrative function. This is what the ESTJ is very good at, but does not care or value for in and of itself. ESTJs have a huge amount of volitional energy. These are types that can act very quickly, very effectively. In an emergency situation, they'll just respond quickly and sort things out. You can feel very safe around an ESTJ because they can react quickly and get things done and essentially take on any sort of physical challenge that comes their way. They are very robust in that sort of way. They're very confident in their ability to make split-second, quick decisions in that moment, much like the ESTP. They've got the same strengths as an ESTP. The difference is they do not value the more forceful, be either dominant or be the boss sort of figure. They have no real desire for that. They will underplay their forcefulness. Nevertheless, it does tend to take over on time to time. And so the ESTJ almost has to learn to almost take a step back and allow things to breathe, because they can often go in and they just sort of smother things simply with their presence and a tendency to easily just take everything on. And they have the energy to do that. This energy is what drives them to be a type which can prepare for every single possibility, because they have the energy to do that. They can just get stuff done. These are the ultimate workhorses in the Socio, and of all the types. And yeah, this is what enables them to accomplish so much. This works with their introverted sensing to make them very sort of sustained high energy people, people who are able to work very hard, but then have their leisure, have their rest, and then get up and start working very, very hard again, tinkering on things. Think of a Thomas Edison with his multiphasic sleep cycles, accomplishing all these different inventions. Very much this idea of an ESTJ, just working through, trying this, doing this, doing this, doing this, like a machine, essentially. And the extroverted sensation very much powers them through that, while the introverted sensation directs that towards quality, detail-oriented work and sustaining things in a way which isn't too intense and doesn't burn out. Now, at the same time, the idea here is that the ESTJ is meant to be growing towards extroverted intuition. So when that doesn't work, then they'll go back. They'll default to extroverted sensation. The more authoritarian side can come out. The more aggressive side at times can come out when absolutely needed, and they'll feel ashamed of this, really. And the ESTJ, when they lose their temper, can be quite frightful indeed. But they don't want to do that. And it's very rare that they allow themselves to lose their temper. They're always trying to keep themselves under control, to be that sort of, well-intentioned, put your best foot forward, very earnest figure. So that's a side to them they sort of are a bit ashamed of, but it is very powerful when it comes out. Anyway, I hope that was helpful for understanding the ESTJ. If you'd like to find out more about the other types, then my other profiles are available on here in my Explain Correctly series. If you'd like to learn more about socionics, the theory which drives my insights, please email worldsocionics@hotmail.com with an email titled course, and I'll be able to essentially enable you to buy the course and find out all about this wonderful theory. And if you'd like to get typed, I'd be able to also type you. So yes, if you're very interested in this, please feel free to email me. Anyway, thank you for tuning in, everyone. Have a lovely rest of your evening or night or day.